Saul Goodman, Jimmy McGill, Gene Takovic, whatever you want to call him, there is many things that he definitely is. He's a lawyer, he's a liar, he's a shagger. But today, let's ask the question, is he a good man? Well, by definition, yes, because that's his name. Alright, I'll rephrase it. Is he a good person? Now, this question does spark debate. And now we finally have the full story of Saul Goodman, Jimmy McGill, Gene Takovic. I'm just going to call him Saul, just to make it simple. We now have the full story of Saul. So this is the perfect time to answer it. Also the perfect time to like and subscribe. And leave a comment. You know, it helps with the algorithm and all that. So, you know, go and do that. So, let's ask the question. Is Saul Goodman a good person? Well, to answer that, we have to ask, what is a good person? To answer that, let's look at some of the most popular theories in ethical philosophy and see if we can define if Saul Goodman's a good person by these. Now, Socrates, not just a great footballer, but also a great philosopher, and back in 400 BC, which was fucking ages ago, he was one of the first philosophers to start studying the philosophy of ethics. Back then, in ancient Greece, philosophers were mainly concerned with asking questions about metaphysical and cosmological questions. And Socrates asked the question, what does it mean to be a good person? And since at the time there was no social media to tell you if you're a good person or not, people had to ponder this for themselves. And over time, ethical philosophy developed, and out of this development, there emerged three significant areas of the study of philosophical ethics, and that's what we're going to talk about today. There's meta-ethics, normative ethics, and applied ethics. Let's start off with meta-ethics. Now, meta-ethics studies ethical concepts themselves. It asks the question, what is good? What is bad? One branch of meta-ethics is moral realism, which states that there are only moral facts, like scientific facts. Some things are just right, some things are just wrong. At the stronger end of moral realism is absolutionism, which states that there are absolute standards against which questions can be judged. Going by this philosophy, most people would say, Saul, he's a cunt. Because, you know, he's a lawyer who defends cartel members, he defends drug kingpins, he cons people, he steals, he uses people, he does all these things that are pretty cunty. And, you know, I can see why people would say that, you know, he's pretty out of order. However, there's another branch of moral realism, which is cultural relativism, which states morals may change from culture to culture. Now, Saul, he lives in America, in a capitalist culture, and his impression of the capitalist culture that he finds himself in is influenced very early by someone who attends his father's shop.
There are wolves and sheep in this world, kid. Wolves and sheep. Figure out which one you're gonna be.
Now, this analogy of wolves and sheep comes from the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, who said all of organic nature is divided into these two types of species, those who are naturally herd animals and those who are naturally loners, those who are prey and those who are predators. And this had a big impression on Saul, as he wanted to be a wolf, not a sheep. Now everyone seems to want to be goats, but that's a different thing. This view of the world is reinforced to Saul by the way that the world treats him. When he's good, when he tries to do the right thing, when he's compassionate, he seems to be punished.
I'm your brother? We're supposed to look out for each other? Why were you working against me, Chuck?
And when he cons, when he steals, when he lies, he seems to be rewarded. Another culture that he finds himself in is the culture of the criminal underworld, or as they call it in the show, the game. And in this culture, anything good that he does gets him in trouble. However, when he's acting selfish, when he's acting immoral, he survives, he thrives. If he starts acting immoral in the criminal underworld, it probably won't end well. If he doesn't represent the cartel members, he'll be brown bread. If he doesn't represent the drug kingpins, he'll be made into fertilizer. If he doesn't blackmail the cab driver, he'll be fucked. So he seems to be in a culture that rewards these actions that people would consider immoral. So if you go by this branch of ethics, then I don't necessarily think Saul Goodman is bad. Another branch of meta-ethics is moral anti-realism, which states the opposite to moral realism, which is probably why it's called anti-realism. It states there are no moral facts. And if we go by this theory, it becomes an even more interesting question of whether Saul Goodman's a good person, because now we have to question, are these actions that I've just stated before, are they right or wrong? A type of moral anti-realism is moral subjectivism, which states moral statements can be true or false, right or wrong, but they refer only to people's attitudes rather than their actions. So could conning itself be considered good? Well, if you're being conned, then no, probably not. No, I don't think you'd enjoy that. But if you're the one doing the conning, then sure, it is good. And when Saul cons, he gains affection. When he's honest and works hard, he gets the opposite response. Could you consider what Saul does good, considering who he's doing it to? They're also immoral. Most of the time. I mean, sometimes he does it to what you would call good people as well. So sometimes he is immoral. So, you know, I don't know. It's a difficult question, this, to be fair. It depends on your attitudes towards his actions. Do you think they're right? Do you think they're wrong? Again, I'm going to err on the side of him being immoral. Now, the second of these three significant fields of study on moral ethics is normative ethics. Normative ethics studies systems of morality and standards of right and wrong. Now, this field of ethics is probably the one that Saul's most concerned about, being a lawyer, and the law itself is a code of ethics. Now, if we judge Saul by the way he treats these code of ethics, then you could say he's highly immoral. I mean, he falsifies evidence, he advises his clients to murder, which isn't great legal advice, and he bends the law in all manner of ways. In fact, normative ethics is probably the main bone of contention, the main reason that his brother thinks that he's a bad person.
You're Slippin' Jimmy. And Slippin' Jimmy I can handle just fine, but Slippin' Jimmy with a law degree is like a chimp with a machine gun.
Most systems of normative ethics can be broken down into three main categories: virtue ethics, deontology, and consequentialism. Let's start with virtue ethics, which emphasises the moral virtues of an individual. So let's look at the virtues of Saul, which change throughout the series. When he starts off in the show, he seems like a nice geezer, seems like he's got some nice virtues. You know, he takes care of his brother with the electric disease, you know, he doesn't do anything mean to him, like chuck an iPhone at him, or chuck a vibrator at him. You know, he's nice to him. When Tuco wants to kill these two blokes, Jimmy says, no, leave it out, mate, you know, just break their legs. And Tuco does it, doesn't kill them, just breaks their legs, you know, seems like a nice geezer. Saul's also a public defender. He defends the less fortunate who can't afford more expensive legal advice. He's supportive of his wife Kim. He supports her in her career. He's never wrote a song about her. He risks his life to save her. He risks blowing his cover to advise a bloke to get a lawyer. He gives a breakfast bar to that prostitute, you know, which is nice. She can walk away with another kind of crunchy nut. He defends the elderly when they're getting taken advantage of, and he gives a motivational speech to that girl who gets rejected for the scholarship.
Because you don't need them.
They're not going to give it to you? So what?
You're going to take it.
You're going to do whatever it takes. Do you hear me? You are not going to play by the rules. You're going to go your own way. You're going to do what they won't do. You're going to be smart. You are going to cut corners, and you are going to win.
So, you know, he's got some good virtues. But then again, he's also got some bad virtues. He's willing to switch sides between Walter and Jesse. He's got no loyalty to either one of them. He lies to the people he's closest to. He cons people with diseases like cancer, and he cons people with disabilities. He doesn't support Liverpool. He ruins Howard's life. So, you know, he does have some bad virtues. So, judging by virtue ethics, I'd say he's a bad person. Also, he's not liked and subscribed, so he's fucking awful. Deontology. This states that the morality of an action should be judged by whether the action is right or wrong under a series of rules. One of the most popular rules comes from Kant, who, as well as being a great midfielder, said the only good thing without qualification is a good will. The only way to be good is to do things motivated by the goodwill, not the fear of being caught or for self-gain, but in your mind it's the good thing to do. And that puts Saul's actions into a new light and raises questions on his virtues. When he was a public defender, he seems to just be doing it for the money. He was adamant about getting correctly compensated for his work, which, there's nothing wrong with that. Like and subscribe. But when Kim was doing public defending, she clearly did it because she loved it. She clearly did it because she wanted to do good. Kim had the option of corporate work and she was very successful in it. But she went to public defending. She chose that because she genuinely likes defending the less fortunate. When Saul defends the elderly people, that is a good virtue. That is something very good. Caring for the elderly, caring for the less fortunate. But he is willing to manipulate situations to get this case settled earlier so that he can get his money sooner, despite the fact it will mean the old people will get less money. When he gives a speech to that girl who gets rejected for the scholarship, that was a nice thing to do, very inspiring, probably made her feel good. But he does seem to mostly be doing it as a form of therapy for himself, as he's working through his repressed feelings towards Chuck.
And the higher you rise, the more they're going to hate you. Good. You rub their noses in it. You make them suffer. You don't matter all that much to them.
I don't want to hurt your feelings. But the truth is, you've never mattered all that much to me.
Furthermore, all of his bad virtues, well, we can see they're not motivated by a greater good. Mostly they're motivated through greed, or self-preservation, or revenge, or horniness, which, is fair enough, whatever keeps it up. But even if Saul's will is good, his will's not good. Then we go into consequentialism, which is the theory that the consequences of one's conduct are the ultimate basis for any judgment on the rightness or wrongness of that conduct. This is usually the theory applied to supporting or condemning drugs. For example, supporters of drugs, particularly psychedelic drugs like LSD or mushrooms, may talk about drugs expanding your mind. Supporters of weed may talk about weed helping some people with medical ailments, or again expanding your mind, helping the creative process, helping you feel more connected with people, making bad films feel bearable, easing anxiety, making you calmer. Just fucking legalise it, you cunts. Come on, just legalise it. Anyway, Saul's clients, they were selling meth, which doesn't really have those great consequences. I don't think it's going to expand your mind. It might expand your heart rate, it might expand your blood pressure, it might expand your anal cavities, depends how you get it, but it probably won't expand your mind. I also can't think of many great albums written on meth, and most people who are using the meth that Walter and Jesse make, they probably won't use it to cure medical ailments. I doubt many of the clientele of Walter and Jesse are saying, "Oh, you've got an headache, mate. Take some old meth, go on, get that in your system, that'll sort it out. That'll cure your hay fever, go on, son." Now, I've never done meth, but I imagine it won't relieve you of your anxieties. It might relieve you of your teeth. The consequences of Saul's actions seem to be mostly horrific. Like everything Saul touches seems to turn to shit. Most of the things that he does lead to having a bad consequence. Stealing from his father led to his father's business failing, which is according to Chuck. Him changing Chuck's paperwork and publicly humiliating him at Saul's bar hearing, you could say led to Chuck dying. His scamming of Howard, you could say led to him dying. Also, getting involved with Kim, you could say led to her quitting her career, quitting the law, getting involved in the criminal underworld, witnessing traumatizing events like murder, and almost committing murder. Thanks to Saul, Huell had to hide in a safe house for 6 months, and his assistant is being investigated by the law. Saul's help of Walter White and Jesse Pinkman has led to many murders, and by connecting Walter White and Jesse Pinkman with Gus Fring, he's helped Gus Fring get more power, which has led to many murders. So the consequences of Saul's actions, they have been terrible, despite him giving a boost to the laser tag economy in Albuquerque. Now, the third significant area of the study of ethical philosophy is applied ethics. And applied ethics consists of the analysis of specific controversial moral issues. And if we're going to look at Saul through the lens of applied ethics, let's pick the most controversial issue regarding Saul Goodman. The one that you could say defined Saul Goodman's life and sealed his destiny. And that is whether he should or shouldn't represent people he knows are dangerous criminals. Now, an argument for this being immoral is that helping clients you know are guilty to avoid jail would mean that you're denying victims and victims' family justice for the crimes they committed, and you're allowing them to roam free and commit more crimes. However, on the other hand, everyone is entitled to a fair trial with legal representation. As famous defence lawyer Tom Mazzaro said, well, yes, he was Michael Jackson's lawyer, that's how I know who he is. When asked if he would ever defend a guilty person, he said, every time a defence attorney does their job, they're making the legal system better. So Saul is playing his part in making the legal system better by defending his client. Also, a defence lawyer isn't just there to make sure your client doesn't get charged with a crime. He's also there to make sure that the prosecutors don't go unchecked, they don't abuse their power, and the punishment that gets handed down is just. However, when it comes to Saul, fuck all I just said right there, as Chuck's words do have some truth when he said he's not a real lawyer. As maybe when Chuck said them then, it was a bit harsh, but in the end, it did prove to be true. Saul Goodman wasn't a real lawyer. He was a businessman disguised as a lawyer. He didn't just inform his clients of their legal rights and try to educate them on the legal system as to not break any laws. He advised them how to actively get away with the laws while still committing the crimes. And he did this while profiting from the crimes. So in this regard, yes, he is immoral. So we come to the question, is Saul Goodman a good person? Well, it's subjective. You might have a different opinion to me, but I'm going to say no. He is not a good person. Putting Saul's actions through the prisms of these ethical theories, I'd say Saul's not a good person. His bad virtues outnumber his good virtues. His will is usually selfish. The consequences of his actions are usually dreadful. He hasn't liked and subscribed to my channel. And at the end of the day, he's left the world a worse place than when he found it. However, if we look at other people in this story, we can see evil in a lot of them. And I don't think I could ever say that for Saul Goodman. When you look at him, sometimes maybe you could see deceptiveness. You could see apathy. But not evil. I could never see evil in Saul Goodman. And in the evil world of Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, that's not an easy achievement.